Hi, this is Mike Hamilton, and you're listening to From the Chair. Each episode, we're going to take a look around the country with athletic directors at leadership issues, career development, contemporaneous issues in the space, and maybe have a little fun along the way. So sit back, take some notes, and let's dive in from the chair. All right, I love it. Hey, welcome From the Chair. I'm your host, Mike Hamilton, and today, really a special guest, a longtime friend. And this is the relaunch, by the way, of From the Chair. And we're going to start out strong with Texas A&M Athletic Director Ross Bjork. Ross, thanks for coming on.
Howdy, Mike. I'm supposed to say howdy here at Texas A&M. So howdy and good morning. And thanks for having me on the first episode of the relaunch here. So great to be with you this morning.
Same. And, I usually make these podcasts, Ross, time agnostic. But I've got to just, with us now coming out of Labor Day weekend and opening weekend in college football, and it's the first time, I think it was 650 days where we've actually had full stadiums. How are you feeling with the big win behind you now and having everybody there in Kyle Field?
I think it was really amazing. I mean, there was so much pent-up energy. Just people wanted to get out and tailgate again and be with their friends and be with family and be in stadiums. And I think we just I think we took it for granted in some ways that last year the stadiums just weren't the same. And then you come into this weekend and you see all around the country, all the energy. And to me, there was no better place than here at Kyle Field. We had 98,000 people. We did a red, white, and blue recreation of 20 years ago. And just people bought into that. And people conformed to wearing the right kind of T-shirts based on what section they sat in. And I think it was just great to have everybody back. But we know COVID is still in our midst. And we have to deal with it and make sure that we're keeping everyone as safe as possible. But it was great to have college football back.
Before we dive into our questions and get in some more conversation, deeper conversation, I am curious, just based on the size of your stadium and the fact that it had been so long since you had a full stadium, all the schools had full stadiums. Did you have any problems with finding support staff, personnel, ushers, gatekeepers, that kind of thing? And how did you guys deal with that there in College Station?
It's a real issue. Just labor force in general, I think, is a real issue, especially in the hospitality field. I think we're seeing that at restaurants and other hospitality industries. And so we were down about 200 workers compared to what we would normally have back in 2018 and before that. And so that's a big issue. So whether that's ticket takers, ushers, concession workers, we definitely felt the squeeze, and we tried to get out some messages ahead of the game that you could have some delays, you could experience just some difficulties. We have high expectations. Of course, we want everything to go perfect. It's not necessarily possible for everything to go perfect when you have 98,000 people, but I think for the most part, things went well, and we learned some things. And there were some things that we actually, like sound system, we sort of ramped down last year because we only had 25% capacity. Well, the sound system didn't quite get turned up when you have 98,000 people. So things like that just you sort of take for granted that you didn't adjust. You have to recalibrate after that first game.
No doubt. Well, hey, let's dial it back here for a minute and talk about your career for a second. And you and I have known each other for a long time. I can remember conversations as development folks sitting out by the water at the Pacific Ocean in La Jolla, talking about our careers, and times when you were talking about baseball hires at Western Kentucky, or I was down in Oxford with you as I was talking to your staff down there, and then I've been to A&M a couple of times with you. Friendship goes back a long time, and you've worked at some really good places with some good mentors. I have to share this story, and I read this, so I'm assuming it's somewhat correct. But, for those who don't know, you played football at Emporia State as a fullback, and I read somewhere in the media, Ross, that you won a Player of the Week award at one point, and you were on the podium, and they were asking you questions and about jobs and careers, and you pointed to the athletic director at Emporia State and said, "I want his job." So I guess that was a little foreshadowing for you.
I guess it was. No, I wanted to be in sports. I grew up around sports. I mean, that's all I did. I grew up in Dodge City, Kansas, and there wasn't much to do. I wasn't into farming and ranching out in Kansas, and so I played sports and hung out with my friends and had a great time. And I just wanted to be involved in it. I was always curious about sort of the inner workings, like when those people sit at the scorer's table, like at a high school basketball game, and they go behind like the back door, like where do those people go? Like, how does all of this work? And so I was just always fascinated by it. And And having the fortune to play small college football, it was a small athletic department. You got to know everyone in the athletic department, and I got to know the athletic director. And that was somewhat spontaneous. I remember that setting. It was like a quarterback club luncheon on a Monday after the game, and like you said, I was fortunate to get the Player of the Week deal, and they were asking us, and I said, "See Dr. Quayle in the back of the room? Bill Quayle was the athletic director. Someday I want to be an athletic. I want his job, not necessarily his job at Emporia State today, but somewhere down the road." And I was fortunate that people helped me along the way. They gave me great advice. They allowed me to be involved in all kinds of different aspects, whether that was Mike Alden, Joe Castiglione, Paul D, Dan Guerrero. Those are all the athletic directors that I worked for. I was able to see great things and been very fortunate along the way. So it's been a great ride. Absolutely.
Well, you led me right to where I was going next. Those four names you just mentioned are legendary names in this space. And it's interesting, you worked in the Midwest with Joe and Mike, and you worked on the West Coast with Dan, you worked in South Florida with Paul. And so I would just we learn from our mentors, we learn from those we work with. Maybe just share something that you learned specific to each of those individuals from each of those guys.
Well, I mean, I'm sure people would say this about me too. We learn the good and the bad, right? You learn some things that, hey, maybe I wouldn't do it quite that way. And then you say, okay, you know what, boy, that's really how, you need to roll this thing out in terms of leadership styles. And so, Joe Castiglione, very, very methodical, very, very patient. Dan Guerrero, very, very similar. Where Mike Alden, more of a hard charger, more an aggressive mindset. Paul D. Paul D was known to lose his temper on occasion. And I was in the midst of my first football game at the University of Miami. We were playing the University of Florida. It's a Monday night. There's some things that didn't quite go right in pregame, and Paul proceeded to tell some folks that, hey, you no longer have a job in the heat of the moment. And on Monday, I went into him and I said, hey, Paul, do you want me to let those people go? And he's like, no. Hey, look, please apologize to them. I didn't mean that. And so, but that was a lesson learned to say, okay, when something happens, how should a leader respond? And again, nothing against Paul, because that was his style, that was his reputation, but you learn from that along the way. And so I was able to take all those different experiences, and then you mold your own style. And I'm a big believer in situational leadership. What does a situation call for? Does it call for somebody to lose their job? Does it call for more compassion and more patience? And you got to put your arm around somebody? Or does it call for a more firm approach? And each situation is different. But each one of those individuals, I wouldn't be where I am without that type of mentorship, that type of guidance, and them allowing me to be in the room, if you will, when big time decisions were made. So very blessed, and maybe those stories will go in the book someday if that ever comes to fruition.
I'm sure it will. So we've been fortunate to have good mentors and folks we've worked with, and this job has changed, right, over the years. Different pressures, different things going on. There's some things that are consistent. And when you think about those that you mentor, and I know you do that from a number of folks that I've talked to around the industry, and you try to guide them. And let's talk specifically just for a minute, maybe those who are in like senior and deputy associate roles. As you look out on the horizon here over the next 2 to 5 years, let's say, what are the things that you would say, hey, you need to be concerned about, you need to be cautious about, you need to be thoughtful about these things that are coming in college athletics, and here's how you ought to approach based upon your perspective for those that you mentor?
Yeah, the hardest thing is just the patience, because we all want to get to where we think we want to go, or what our goals and aspirations are. And that's the hardest thing. And look, I was fortunate. Maybe it's easy for me to say it. I was fortunate to be an AD at 37 years old. So maybe it's easy for me to say patience, but I think that's the biggest thing with the industry changing on an hourly, daily basis. I mean, when we get off this meeting, Mike, there might be another change in college athletics, right? Because it's rapidly changing. So I think the patience word comes to mind when I'm thinking about where's the industry going, what are the changes that are evolving constantly, And I do believe that, look, I grew up on the fundraising side. That was your pathway as well. I do think that the regulatory side, like I never had to worry about getting to know the legal counsel or studying NCAA bylaws or regulatory affairs or studying contracts. I didn't really think about those things. But I would advise people to learn more about those aspects of our industry because we're dealing with Congress, we're dealing with state legislation, we're dealing with lawsuits, we're dealing with TV contracts, we're dealing with lots of things on the sort of regulatory legal affairs side that really weren't on our desk 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And so those are the kind of topics that I'm talking about with our staff is just how do we stay on top of these things? How do we continue to evolve in the changing landscape of college athletics and college sports? So people that are looking to get into this, you almost need to have like two lines of thinking. You need sort of the traditional AD, building buildings, hiring coaches, fundraising, ticket sales, winning games, all student athlete support. And then over here on this side, all the legal, regulatory, governance things that are just constant. So maybe we need two ADs, one
Yeah.
for legal and governance and one for, oh yeah, by the way, we want to win games and support our student athletes. So I think that's what we have to keep in mind as things evolve.
Yeah, and I'm curious. You've got a fairly large staff. Do you have someone specifically dedicated to the legal and regulatory in house, or do you use university help on that front?
Well, here at A&M, we have such a robust Texas A&M system legal affairs department, and so we actually rely on them. They're our legal counsel, Office of General Counsel. They're a robust staff, and so we're actually very lucky here that we have the right kind of resources. Where when I came from Ole Miss, we had just hired in-house counsel to work in the athletic department and interface with the university general counsel. So each program is going to be different, but here at A&M, we've got a lot of resources, and then people in compliance, a couple law degrees in compliance, and then you just have to have experts around the table in your senior leadership team, and that's what we've tried to do here.
I should have mentioned, I think for the most part, those who watch and listen to this already know this, Ross, but when you mentioned being 37, when you became an athletic director, that was at Western Kentucky, having been at Miami and UCLA and Mizzou, some other places, and you were the youngest athletic director in FBS at that time. I actually share that distinction when I was hired at Tennessee, interestingly enough. And then you were there for a period and then went to Ole Miss and we were in Oxford for 7 years and now been at Texas A&M. I think this is your second year, right? Second full year?
Yep,
Yeah.
just past 2-year anniversary.
Yeah. So here's my question for you as it relates to, let's talk about the AD chair even more specifically now. But thinking about that in conjunction with this past year, what did you learn about Ross Bjork during the pandemic? We learned a lot about the world, right? What did you learn about Ross Bjork and who you are during the pandemic?
That's a great question. And I think we all have probably taken some moments to reflect, but it's been so busy that maybe we haven't taken the full time to really reflect on that. I think for me, I realized how much I love being at home with my boys and my wife, Sonia. Obviously, we were stuck in those first couple months where we weren't really doing anything else but sitting there at the house and being on Zoom meetings and things like that. But I really learned that, boy, when I have free time, when I don't have an event or a game to attend to, being at home with family and really soaking in those moments. Maybe I took that for granted in my sort of building years because you're just constantly churning and you say yes to everything and you're willing to go anywhere. And you talk about balance of family and your job. And so I think being at home is what I learned. Like, I really enjoy this because I'm seeing my kids grow up. I have an 11-year-old and a 15-year-old, two boys. They're active. They always want to do something with dad. Physically, I can't keep up with them. I'm getting older. Bad back, bad ankles, things like that. But I think just being at home with family is what I really treasured during this pandemic time and this shutdown. So, and then you try to learn, right? You try to read more books. And so I got on more of a cycle of doing that because we had a little more time. So those are some of the lessons from a personal standpoint.
But I'm hopeful that not only you but others who are in your role can find a way to have more time with family. I think that's important. And I remember, Bob Woodruff, who was a longtime athletic director at Tennessee, he would take he'd take some of the summer off, and play golf and do that kind of thing. And I was with DeLoss Dodge one time at Texas, and we were at a Super Bowl party, and he was talking to me about the role. And this was when DeLoss was in his latter years at Texas, and he said, "Hey man, you need to be playing more golf." Well, that was just not part of the mentality, right? But I do think, given the pressures that you have, when it's all said and done, your family is going to end up being there for you, right? So the challenge to each of us is to make sure that we dedicate the time to them, to spend time with them. Those boys aren't going to be 15 and 11 forever, right?
That's exactly right. People talk about balance, and I think it's more about prioritizing more than anything, because there are going to be some weeks and some nights where you're just not going to be there. There is an event that you have to be at, or you've been asked to speak at an event, and it's just a requirement, if you will. So I think when you're there at your home, you've got to be in the moment. It can't be, hey, I'm going to be at home, but I'm going to be on my iPad or on my computer or on my iPhone, or it can't be that way. You've got to really be in the moment, and I think that's utmost priority for all of us dads and moms and parents who work in college athletics.
You came to a weekend I had with some athletic directors, administrators, and some football coaches at one point, and you may recall I did that with basketball coaches as well. And one of the things that the basketball coaches noted during that weekend was that they always get concerned when they have a change in leadership in the AD chair, because it's this newness, right? So one of the other things that you have faced during the pandemic is you now have a new president. I don't know if it's president or chancellor at A&M, but you now have a new leader on campus. And I know you're helped by the fact that she's been on campus and you've got a relationship. But how do you, as an athletic director, senior administrator, handle this change and senior leadership on campus and make sure that you get aligned as quickly as possible?
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Mike. And I've been an athletic director. This is my going on my 12th academic year, and I've had 8 different CEOs, chancellors, presidents, whatever you want to call them, and so including interims. And so 8. So that's a lot. And so I think what you have. So the good thing is I've got some experience in these transitions. I think what you have to do early on is build a transparent relationship with that individual. And I've done that here with President Kathy Banks. And the great thing about President Banks is she has been at A&M for over a decade. She understands the value of athletics. She was the dean of the engineering school, and they owned a football suite. So she understood that I need to utilize athletics as a vehicle to promote the School of Engineering. And so I think having that familiarity helped her really transition into athletics. And so every transition I've had, we provided a notebook, we give updates on athletics, we put together financial information, facilities, sports, contracts, just sort of an indoctrination notebook, if you will. And then the unique thing here at A&M is she started on June 1st. And then guess what happened on July 21st? We had conference expansion. And guess who's involved in conference expansion? Not the athletic directors, the presidents. And so she had to quickly learn and get up to speed on how governance works in the SEC, how communication, how alignment. Obviously, there's politics involved locally, nationally, all those kind of things. And I tell you what, she grasped everything within seconds. She knew the issues. She knew where to turn. She knew the people to talk to. She knew how to press and be firm when she had to. And I was really impressed with that. And so the bottom line, communication, relationships, be transparent with whoever your CEO is. And I think that will ultimately, win the day when it comes to these kind of transitions.
Yeah, that's great points all. So you mentioned expansion. I wasn't necessarily going to talk about that today, but since you gave an opening, we'll jump in there just real quickly. So obviously the move for Texas and Oklahoma to come to the SEC, and we're seeing some chatter about some moves to the Big 12 from 4 members of the American Conference. You've seen the expansion in the SEC before. You understand the league. You've been in the league for a long time. Just talk in general about the move for those 2 schools into the league and what you see on the forefront let's talk specifically for the Southeastern Conference.
Yeah, well, look, the SEC is, and obviously we set in the league. I've been in the league 10 years. It's the best conference in college athletics in more ways than one, and it's comprehensive, it's broad-based, it's successful. Obviously, we have the support at the highest level, whether that's revenue, whether that's the mindset, whether that's creating trends in college athletics. The SEC, I just think is the best. It's the best league that I've been in. And so I think you have to look at, for us here at A&M, obviously there's a lot of history with the University of Texas and how the Big 12 evolved and then split up and all those dynamics. And so for us, you really had to separate sort of how this happened versus the what. May not like exactly how it worked on the front end, and those things had to happen fast, but you can't argue with the what. The what is the SEC is a leader. This change in college athletics is coming at a rapid pace. We have to be on the right side of the equation. Texas A&M's on the right side of the equation. The SEC's on the right side of the equation. So if Texas and Oklahoma were going to go somewhere, it was in our best interest as a conference to make sure that we secured our future with their help. And so again, as things change, as TV viewership changes, as value of matchups and games and all those things evolve, it just made sense to go ahead and expand with these two institutions. And so you've got some rivalries built in. Obviously, us and University of Texas have a great rivalry. You re-engage that. That's going to mean so much to our program, but the state of Texas, college football. And we have been saying, obviously, those first 48 hours, emotional, a lot of responses that we made. But really, I think you have to look at, hey, Texas and Oklahoma saw the value of the expansion when we joined the SEC, when Missouri joined, and now they want to come with us. And I think that's just a great testament to what we've built, what the SEC has built, and the trend of college athletics continues to change. And again, we're at the forefront and we're on the right side of the equation. So it's going to mean a whole lot in lots of different things. And can't wait to put schedules together and see where all this goes. But I think it's just going to be fun for the fans and for our programs and our student athletes as we move forward.
So the realignment, and I think has something to do with, the fundamental questions around the NCAA and governance and where it's all seemingly been in the last couple of years. And, this committee that will start meeting in November to look at the future of the NCAA. I know each of you have had the opportunity to weigh in with your thoughts, and I'm not asking you to share anything you don't want to share here, but if you could maybe highlight a couple of things that you hope will come out of that. And the question, I guess, I'll just be pointed, do you think that the composition of the group is going to allow for the look at the NCAA in a way that will accomplish something, because it is so broad-based, as the NCAA action has to typically be? What are the things that you're concerned at, want to see about, and want to see coming out of the group that's going to start meeting this fall?
Yeah, no, I think you're right on it, Mike, in terms of, again, rapid changes in college athletics. And I don't know if the NCAA has ever had a constitutional convention. Maybe there was back in the 80s or the 1950s or whatever, but not in my lifetime. And so I think a couple concerns. One, the makeup of the committee only had 6 FBS, and I think it has expanded since FBS membership. And so, again, I played Division II football. I loved it, but I don't think Emporia State is necessarily in a position to set the agenda for Texas A&M. Just different dynamics, different resources, different priorities. So that part's concerning. Here's what I hope happens. I think what we are in college athletics is we're at a crossroads of what we are, sort of an identity crisis, I guess is the right word. We have an identity misperception crisis on our hands where people are asking, what are we? Are we higher education mixed with sports, or are we sports that happens to be a part of higher education? Which are we? We're not professional, right? We don't have employees as student athletes, but we know we're not on the amateur spectrum anymore. And so what I hope happens out of this constitutional convention is we actually create our identity to say what we are. And that is an enterprise who plays college sports, but there's still an educational component. but we have more benefits to student athletes. Let's redefine the scholarship structure. Let's redefine what they're able to access, and we've done that through name, image, likeness. But each state is different now. Let's redefine those things and really get to the core of what we do, and that's educate and play sports, and give our student athletes the ability to maximize whatever their potential is in all kinds of different facets. So we need identity. We need to get out of this sort of crisis of confidence. We need an association. People talk about, well, let's just jettison the NCAA. I don't think that's the right approach. We need an association to hold us together, but we also need some more autonomy. And so those are things that I'm looking at. And I know the SEC is pushing for a lot of these things as well. And hopefully we can get some meat on the bone where we can solve these problems, get our identity back, and make sure that we support our student athletes at that highest level.
Well, you know this, as having been a former student athlete and having worked in the industry as long as you have, there's something good about intercollegiate athletics, right? And, we need to do whatever we can to protect that goodness. While it may look different in terms of how it manifests itself in 2021 versus how it may have been so in 1950 or 1985 or whatever, we need to protect the essence of the intercollegiate model, whatever that may mean in today's definition, right? And I'm hopeful that that will come out of this.
Yes, sir. That's what I'm hopeful for too, and I think we can get there. I do. I think people they're attentive about what's happening. Hopefully, the right approach happens. Hopefully, there is enough of that autonomy voice, that FBS voice, at the table that can really, like I said, get to the heart of the matter that we need to deal with.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to shift gears one more time, and we'll. This is the last big question, and then we'll kind of have some fun on the way out. I think that most folks judge athletic directors at the end of the day by how they hire and retain coaches, and there's complexity to that, no doubt. And you guys made news within the last couple of weeks with a new contract extension for Jimbo, significant numbers involved in all that. And I was having a conversation with another athletic director last week, not in the context of A&M, by the way, just so you know, but in the context of the costs associated with change, particularly when you're making changes in football because of the buyouts at the head coach level and all the affected staff. It's like trying to move an aircraft carrier in the middle of a river, right? And so you guys have obviously made a decision to invest significantly in your head coach, and I'm assuming your assistant coaches. And there's a reason for that. You have one of the premier coaches in America. History shows that. Just talk about your philosophy of why these kinds of contracts are important when you have a contract that's a coach that's been successful as Jimbo has been, and the investment you're making in football at A&M.
Well, no, exactly, Mike. And I think, we were hoping that we could get this done earlier in August, but just the cycle of different kind of meetings and things like that. And my goal was to have something in place before the season started. And we were able to accomplish that. It happened on game week, but we were able to accomplish that. And here's my thing is, if you believe in something and you know that the market conditions are going to constantly change, let's get ahead of that. Let's get ahead of whatever may happen in the coaching cycle. We believe in Jimbo. There's tons of momentum that we have right now, recruiting, on the field, coming out of last year. Our donors are fired up. Our fans are fired up. The 12th man, the students. There's so much energy right now. Let's capitalize on that. Let's make sure that we have that right kind of continuity and get Jimbo back to that original 10-year deal. It shows commitment. It sends a message that we're here to stay. We're building a program to last. We're not just a one-hit wonder after an Orange Bowl and a number 4 finish. Jimbo talks about there's an Aggie ring that students earn here at Texas A&M, and he said, I want 2 rings. I want the Aggie ring and I want a championship ring. And so if you have the right person, let's lock in. Let's get it done. Let's do it ahead of the season before we ever play a game. So that was our mentality this summer, is going into this season. Let's secure the continuity. Let's make sure that coach knows that A&M believes in what he's doing. It gives him the confidence to just go. Doesn't have to worry about anything. Can coach this season, keep recruiting. When the cycle happens, we won't be in the cycle. and we make sure that we have a coach that's going to be here for a long, long time. So continuity in college athletics, I mean, you can look at all kinds of programs, 3 years here, 4 years here, 5 years here. That doesn't work. You need to have stability at that highest level. And it's proven to work out. And that was our belief as we went into this discussion this summer.
Congratulations on that. So I know that coaches of Jimbo's success, they're always looking at the next thing, right? So the dollars they're being compensated is always part of it. But is it, nutrition centers? Is it slides and putt-putt courses? Is it more analysts, whatever? What's the next new thing on the horizon you think that coaches are looking towards to be additive to the sport?
You know what I think it is? Obviously, there was a lot of facilities that were built, and those programs decided to build maybe some of the bells and whistle pieces of it. What I'm seeing and what we're focused on is how do we make our players better? So, what kind of film rooms do we have? What kind of practice facilities do we have? How convenient is the weight room to the locker room, to the practice fields, to the indoor facility, to the nutrition center, to the academic center? Like, where is all that stuff located? How efficient is it? Because I do believe, so with name, image, likeness, and all those kind of things, I don't know if the bells and whistles will be as attractive in recruiting. I think it's going to be, can you make me a better player to get to whatever that next level is? And then can I capitalize on my name, image, likeness at your university? And so those are the kind of trends that I think are headed our way. They're already here, but headed our way in that next round of facilities. So we're about ready to launch a capital campaign to redo some facilities, add some new facilities. But that player development piece, I think, is going to be critical, and the efficiency piece is going to be critical as we move in. We've already got nutrition centers. We've already got the bells and whistles. We've got those kind of things. Now it's, can you make me better? And can I capitalize on my brand? And that in turn satisfies the player responsibility, if you will, to make them the best they can be. So I think that's where it's headed in the future.
No doubt, man. Well, unfortunately, if I got off on the NIL with you here for a while, we'd be here longer, and I've got to have
Right,
other topics
right.
to talk to other athletic directors about, right?
Yeah,
So,
that's right.
so we won't go there today on that. But let's end on I'll call it a speed round, just a couple of fun things. I know you're a fun-loving guy. These are short answers. This is to help folks get to know Ross Bjork a little bit better. Okay, so they're all going to be easy. Don't think too much about it.
Yeah.
So the first
Okay.
one out of the gate is, hey, you're in Texas, so is it beef brisket or barbecue or pork?
Oh, it's brisket. Absolutely. I've actually
Okay.
smoked a couple briskets myself on the green egg since I've been in Texas. So you got to go with the brisket.
That must have been when you were home during the pandemic, if you had time to do that,
It
right?
was. That's exactly right. Over the
All right.
holidays. Absolutely.
What's your favorite side with that, by the way?
I think you got to go sweet potato fries.
Sweet
Can't
potato
go
fries.
wrong. And then Brussels sprouts. Brussels sprouts, sweet potato fries.
Wow. All right. So you grew up in Kansas. Favorite professional sports team as a kid?
So I'm going to throw people off here. So I watched Walter Payton run for like 270 yards when I was 8 years old, 1980. And so I've loved the Chicago Bears ever since that moment. My son is named Peyton after Walter Payton, Payton. So grew up a huge Chicago Bears fan, had WGN on the satellite dish so I could watch all the Chicago sports. And then my dad grew up in Denver, and so he was a Broncos fan. So it was sort of NFC Bears, AFC Broncos.
That's great.
And then Kansas
Good
City Royals.
backstory.
Can't go wrong. Kansas City Royals were in their heyday when I was growing up. So huge Jarrett, Kansas City Royals fan.
Okay. Iced tea, sweet tea, unsweetened tea, or Arnold Palmer?
Definitely Palmer. Probably 2 lemon. You got to spice it up with some.
Awesome. What does Ross Bjork do to relax?
This kind of goes back to what I said earlier, just family, just hanging around the family. I love to work out, love to have that stress reliever as well. But I think just hanging around the family. My son's playing high school football. So even though that's a little stressful on mom watching those games, I just love being in the stands and just being a dad. And so just being around family, I think, is the most relaxing thing for me.
Two more. Mountains or the beach?
I don't know. I grew up a mountain person. Again, my dad grew up in Denver. My grandparents lived in Denver. Going to the mountains was an every vacation event. But now living in the southeast, going to the beach, going to that Gulf Coast of Florida. So, how about beach in the winter, mountains in the summer? So
I
you
like
mix
it.
up the weather. How about that?
I like it. Yeah. Okay. So this last one's a little unfair, and you can plead the fifth. But your favorite college tradition: midnight Yale practice or the Grove?
Whew. Yeah, you got to go where your feet are, right?
Yeah.
Yell practice. We had Mike. We had 40,000 people at our first Yell practice this
Wow.
year. That doesn't happen. And there's no advertising, there's no concessions, there's no entertainment. People just show up. So I don't care what university you're at. There's nothing that can compare. There's no marketing firm that could create that event and say, "Oh yeah, all these people are going to show up to practice their yells." It just doesn't happen. So nothing compares to yell practice.
That's great. If folks haven't seen it or heard about it, they need to check it out for sure in College Station. Hey, look, man, I really appreciate the time this morning. Get to catch up with you always. And I thank you for what you've shared about your career, your thoughts on the NCAA, coach contracts, presidential changes, all the different topics that we discussed today. Always fun to be with you. And so appreciate you coming on with us today.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks for your friendship. Appreciate your leadership in college athletics.
All right, Ross. This has been From the Chair with Mike Hamilton. We'll see you next time.